Standing on the deck of Seaside Haven Resort, I watched the same sunset that had painted my childhood memories golden. The beachfront property stretched before me, every inch restored to its former glory after 8 years of dreaming about this moment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom about the annual family reunion next weekend. I dialed her number, my heart racing with anticipation for what I was about to say. "Hi, Mom. It's Burton. About the reunion at Seaside Haven this year. I'm afraid you'll need to find somewhere else. Just like your house, mine's completely booked. No room available." I hung up, finally tasting the sweetness of long-awaited justice. 8 years ago, when I was 26, the Walker family name meant something in coastal Carolina hospitality. 3 generations had built our empire, starting with my great-grandfather's small fishing lodge that grew into Walker Hospitality Group. We owned 6 properties along the coast, but Seaside Haven Resort was our crown jewel. $12 million worth of prime beachfront real estate, where families had been making memories for over 30 years. I had been the golden child, the Harvard MBA with the brilliant business mind who was destined to lead our company into the future. My brother Jake, 2 years older and always living in my shadow, managed day-to-day operations while I focused on strategic planning and expansion. Our sister Sarah handled marketing and guest relations. It was supposed to be the perfect family business model. The crisis began when Seaside Haven needed a massive renovation. The building was showing its age, and guest satisfaction scores were dropping. We needed $3 million immediately to stay competitive with newer resorts moving into our market. I recommended diversifying our investment portfolio, specifically looking into emerging tech startups that could generate quick capital for the renovation. During our family meeting that October, I presented my research on several promising companies. The whole family sat around the mahogany table in our conference room overlooking the ocean. Mom took notes while Dad asked detailed questions about projected returns. Jake seemed supportive, nodding along and even suggesting we move quickly before other investors caught on. But Jake had been living a double life I never suspected. While I was researching legitimate investment opportunities, he had been making unauthorized trades using company funds to cover his gambling debts. Casino trips to Atlantic City had turned into high-stakes poker games that consumed increasingly larger amounts of money. He had been bleeding our accounts dry for months. When the tech market crashed 2 weeks after our meeting, Jake saw his opportunity. He had already lost the $3 million at poker tables, but he convinced our parents that I had made unauthorized investments against their wishes. He doctored email communications to make it appear I had acted alone, changing timestamps and adding fake conversations that painted me as reckless and secretive. The family meeting where my life fell apart happened on a rainy Thursday morning. Jake had prepared his evidence carefully, printing out the falsified emails and bank statements that supposedly showed my financial recklessness. When he spread the papers across the conference table, my parents' faces went white with shock and rage. "Burton invested our entire renovation fund without authorization," Jake announced, his voice trembling with fake emotion. He ignored Dad's explicit instructions to wait for board approval. "Now it's all gone." I stared at the documents in disbelief. The emails showed conversations I never had, decisions I never made, authorizations I never gave. But the bank statements were real. $3 million had indeed vanished from our accounts. The only thing missing was the truth about where it had actually gone. "This isn't real," I stammered, grabbing the fake emails. "I never sent these messages. Jake, you know I followed protocol for every investment decision." But Jake had played his cards perfectly. He produced witness statements from casino employees who claimed they had seen me at high-stakes tables, though they were actually describing him. He had even created fake credit card statements, showing luxury purchases I had never made. Mom's face crumpled as she processed what she believed was my betrayal. How could you risk everything our family built? 3 generations of hard work, gone because you thought you knew better than everyone else. Dad sat in stunned silence, staring at the financial statements. His hands shook as he realized our company was facing potential bankruptcy. Without the renovation, Seaside Haven would lose its competitive edge. Without Seaside Haven's revenue, our entire business model would collapse. "You've destroyed us," Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. You've destroyed everything. Within a week, I was expelled from the family business, stripped of my ownership stake, and banned from all family gatherings. The locks on my office were changed. My access to company accounts was revoked. My name was removed from all business documents and marketing materials. The final blow came when Mom called me to her house one last time. I thought she wanted to hear my side of the story, but instead she handed me a legal document, officially disinheriting me from the family estate. "Don't ever contact us again," she said, her voice cold and final. "You've destroyed everything 3 generations built. We have nothing left to say to each other." I tried one last time to explain that Jake was lying, that the evidence was fabricated, that I would never have risked our family's legacy on unauthorized investments. But her mind was made up. In her eyes, I had transformed from beloved son to family destroyer in a single moment of supposed greed and recklessness. The door closed behind me with a finality that echoed through my soul. 8 years later, standing on the deck of the resort I now owned, I could still hear that door slamming shut on my old life. The first year of exile nearly killed me. Blacklisted from the hospitality industry due to whispers about the Walker family scandal, I watched my career crumble like sand through my fingers. Nobody wanted to hire the man who had supposedly bankrupted his own family business. My Harvard MBA became worthless paper when every potential employer in hospitality knew my name was associated with financial irresponsibility. I ended up working the night shift as a janitor at Sunset Motel, a budget chain property 40 miles inland from the coast. The irony wasn't lost on me. I went from developing strategic plans for luxury resorts to mopping floors and cleaning toilets for $8 an hour. But I needed the job, and night work meant I could avoid seeing people who might recognize me. My studio apartment measured 300 square feet and smelled like mildew, no matter how much air freshener I used. I survived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, watching my savings evaporate as slowly as my hope. The contrast between my new reality and my former life felt surreal. 3 months earlier, I had been discussing million-dollar investment strategies in boardrooms. Now I was scrubbing bathroom stalls and emptying trash cans. The social isolation hurt worse than the financial struggle. Emma, my girlfriend of 3 years, broke up with me 2 weeks after the scandal broke. I had been planning to propose to her on New Year's Eve, had even bought the ring. Instead, she returned it along with everything I had ever given her. "I can't be with someone who destroyed his own family," she said, not meeting my eyes. "How can I trust you with my future, when you couldn't be trusted with theirs?" I tried to explain what really happened, but she had already heard Jake's version of events. The story had spread through our social circle faster than wildfire. According to the narrative everyone believed, I had secretly gambled away the family fortune in some kind of investment scheme gone wrong. Through social media, I watched my former life continue without me. Sarah got engaged to her longtime boyfriend Marcus during a beachside ceremony at Seaside Haven. I saw the photos of the entire family celebrating while I worked another double shift at the motel. Mom looked radiant in her mother of the bride role, though I noticed she had aged considerably since our family crisis. Tyler, Sarah's son from her first marriage, grew from a 4-year-old toddler into a preteen without knowing his uncle existed. I watched him play Little League baseball through photos posted by relatives, celebrated his birthday parties from afar, and wondered if he would ever know the truth about why Uncle Burton had vanished from family pictures. The holidays were the hardest. Thanksgiving and Christmas posts showed elaborate family gatherings where my absence had become normalized. Everyone looked happy and united, as if removing me had somehow healed the family wound, rather than covering it with a bandage of lies. But exile taught me lessons I never could have learned in my privileged former life. Miguel Rodriguez, who owned Sunset Motel, became an unexpected mentor and father figure. He was a 62-year-old immigrant who had built his business from nothing, understanding every aspect of hotel operations because he had done every job himself. "You want to know the real secret of hospitality?" Miguel asked me one night during our 3 a.m. break. "It's not about luxury amenities or fancy marketing. It's about making people feel like they matter. Every guest, every employee, every person who walks through your door should feel valued." Miguel taught me that true business success comes from understanding your operation from the ground up. While I had studied hospitality management in textbooks, Miguel had lived it. He showed me how a perfectly cleaned room could make a budget property feel luxurious, how personal attention could turn a one-night stay into a loyal customer relationship, and how treating employees well directly impacted guest satisfaction. Working nights gave me days to study. I earned additional certifications in hotel management, restaurant operations, and real estate development. I studied sustainable tourism practices, learned about eco-friendly hospitality trends, and researched emerging markets in the travel industry. My Harvard education had given me theoretical knowledge, but my exile was providing practical wisdom. The third year brought an unexpected discovery that changed everything. I was working a catering job at a charity event in Charleston when I spotted Jake across the room. He was dressed in an expensive suit, laughing loudly at a high-stakes poker table that had been set up for entertainment. But this wasn't casual party gambling. I watched him lose $5,000 in 20 minutes, with the focused intensity of someone with a serious problem. My heart raced as pieces started falling into place. Jake's nervous behavior during family meetings, his frequent unexplained trips to Charleston and Atlanta, the way he had seemed unusually knowledgeable about gambling terminology when discussing my supposed casino visits. I had never connected these details before, but seeing him throw money around with desperate recklessness made everything clear. I followed him discreetly as he left the charity event and drove to an underground poker room in a warehouse district. Through the windows, I watched Jake lose another $15,000 in cash, money I knew he couldn't afford, given our family's financial struggles. His hands shook as he wrote what appeared to be an IOU for even more money. That night, I realized my brother had been living with a gambling addiction long before our family crisis. He hadn't just stolen $3 million to cover bad investments. He had been systematically embezzling money to feed his addiction, using the tech investment crash as perfect cover for crimes he had already committed. The question that haunted me was whether Mom knew. Had she discovered Jake's gambling problem and chosen to maintain the lie rather than admit she had wrongly destroyed her youngest son? Or was she still completely unaware that the family destroyer was still living under her roof, continuing to steal while playing the role of loyal caretaker? 8 years of exile had transformed me from a privileged business school graduate into someone who understood real struggle. But it had also revealed the truth about my family that would eventually set me free. The next morning, I made the most important decision of my exile. Using my meager savings, I hired Linda Chen, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Linda was a former FBI agent who had started her own practice after retiring, and she came highly recommended by the lawyer who had helped me understand my legal options after being disinherited. "I need you to document everything about my brother's activities," I told her during our first meeting in her cramped office above a diner. "I think he's been gambling away family money for years, but I need proof that will stand up in court." Linda was thorough and patient. For 2 years, she built an airtight case against Jake. She photographed him at casinos in 3 different states, documented his losses through contacts in the gaming industry, and traced his financial transactions through a network of informants who understood how gambling addicts moved money around to hide their activities. The evidence was staggering. Jake had been stealing from Walker Hospitality Group for 6 years before the tech investment crisis. He had embezzled over $5 million in total, using increasingly sophisticated methods to cover his tracks. The $3 million everyone believed I had lost in bad investments had actually disappeared into poker games and slot machines months before I ever presented my diversification strategy. Linda discovered that Jake had created an entire shadow accounting system, moving money between fake vendor accounts and shell companies he had established. He had been paying himself consulting fees for work that never happened, creating false expense reports for business trips that were actually gambling excursions, and systematically inflating operational costs to skim the differences. The investigation revealed details that broke my heart. My father, Thomas, had grown suspicious of Jake's financial management in his final months. Dad had started asking questions about discrepancies in the books, requesting documentation that Jake struggled to provide. Linda found evidence that Thomas had been preparing to launch his own investigation when he died of a heart attack. Even more devastating was the discovery that Dad had tried to reach me during his final weeks. He had left 17 voicemails on my phone, messages I had deleted without listening because hearing his voice was too painful. Linda managed to recover them from my phone company's archives. In the final message, recorded just 3 days before his death, Dad's weak voice carried a message that shattered me. "Burton, son, I need to talk to you. I've been looking at our books, and something doesn't add up about what happened with that investment money. I think I may have made a terrible mistake. Please call me back. I love you, and I'm sorry for not listening to your side of the story." Dad had died still believing he had wrongly accused me, but without the strength to investigate further or the courage to confront the family about his doubts. He had carried the weight of potentially destroying his innocent son until his final breath. The investigation also revealed that Mom had discovered some of Jake's embezzlement the previous year. Linda found email evidence showing that Dorothy had confronted Jake about suspicious transactions she had noticed while reviewing monthly financial statements. But instead of exposing the truth, she had chosen to help him cover it up. The emails showed a woman paralyzed by pride and fear. Mom knew that admitting Jake's guilt would mean acknowledging she had destroyed her relationship with her innocent son. Rather than face that devastating truth, she had chosen to become complicit in Jake's continued theft while maintaining my exile. One email particularly gutted me. Mom had written to Jake, "We cannot let Burton know what we've discovered. If he finds out we were wrong about everything, it will destroy what's left of this family. We have to find a way to fix this without admitting our mistake." Linda's evidence showed that even after Dad's death, Jake had continued stealing. With Thomas no longer around to ask uncomfortable questions, and with Dorothy covering for him, Jake had embezzled another $800,000 in the past year alone. He was using the money to pay gambling debts, while pretending to help manage the family crisis he had created. Walker Hospitality Group was hemorrhaging money faster than ever. Without Seaside Haven's revenue, and with Jake's continued theft, Mom had been forced to sell 2 smaller properties at below-market prices. She had mortgaged the family home twice, and was considering bankruptcy to avoid complete financial ruin. Meanwhile, Jake maintained his facade as the devoted son trying to save the family business. He attended every family gathering, played the role of protective big brother to Sarah, and accepted sympathy from relatives who praised him for staying loyal, while his younger brother had allegedly destroyed everything. The psychological manipulation was masterful and cruel. Jake had not only stolen millions of dollars, but had also stolen my family relationships, my reputation, and 8 years of my life. He had transformed himself from criminal to hero in the family narrative, while I became the villain in a story I had never participated in. Linda's final report contained enough evidence to send Jake to prison for decades. Bank records, casino surveillance footage, testimony from gambling associates, and documentation of his financial crimes painted a complete picture of systematic theft and fraud. But more importantly, it proved my absolute innocence in every accusation that had been made against me. Armed with this evidence, I faced a choice. I could immediately expose Jake and clear my name, or I could use the information strategically to ensure maximum impact. After 8 years of exile, I had learned the value of patience and planning. My revenge would be complete, but it would also be perfectly timed. That's when I discovered the opportunity that would make my plan possible. Seaside Haven Resort was quietly being offered for sale by its current owners, who had driven the property into near bankruptcy through poor management. The asking price was $8 million, well below its actual value. But the biggest shock was yet to come. While going through Dad's papers to help Mom prepare for potential bankruptcy, Sarah found a safety deposit box key that nobody knew existed. Inside that box was documentation for a trust fund Thomas had secretly established for me years earlier. The trust contained $2 million that had been earning interest for a decade, along with a letter that would change everything. Dad's letter, written just 6 months before his death, expressed his growing doubts about my guilt and his deep regret for not investigating further. "If something happens to me before I can make this right," he wrote, "this money is Burton's inheritance. He deserves to know that his father never stopped loving him, even when I was too proud to admit I might have been wrong." Mom had hidden the trust fund's existence for 2 years, unable to face the implications of Dad's final gift to his exiled son. But financial desperation had forced her to search through every asset, and now she held proof of Dad's faith in my innocence. The trust fund gave me exactly what I needed. Combined with the money I had saved during my exile, and the profits from the business ventures I was about to begin, I would have enough to purchase Seaside Haven Resort and execute the most satisfying revenge in hospitality history. My plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would buy the resort through a shell company, restore it to glory, and time my revelation perfectly with the family's annual Memorial Day reunion. They would discover my success and their mistake in the most public and dramatic way possible. Justice was coming, and it would be served on the same deck where I had dreamed of proposing to Emma 8 years earlier. But this time, I would be the one in control of my destiny. Miguel's partnership offer came at the perfect moment. After 5 years of watching me transform from broken exile into dedicated student of the hospitality industry, he decided to expand his modest motel business into a small chain of budget-friendly properties. He needed someone with formal business education and strategic vision. I needed capital and the chance to rebuild my professional reputation. "I've been watching you, Burton," Miguel said during one of our late-night conversations. "You clean rooms like someone who understands that every detail matters. You handle difficult guests like someone who genuinely cares about their experience. You study business trends like someone who still has big dreams. I want to offer you a full partnership." Our first venture was renovating 3 rundown motels Miguel had purchased at foreclosure auctions. I applied everything I had learned during my exile, combining my Harvard business education with the practical knowledge Miguel had taught me. We focused on creating exceptional experiences at budget-friendly prices, proving that luxury wasn't about expensive amenities, but about attention to detail and genuine hospitality. The properties transformed under our management. I instituted training programs that taught housekeeping staff to take pride in their work, created customer service protocols that made guests feel valued regardless of the room rate they paid, and developed marketing strategies that highlighted our authentic approach to hospitality. Within 18 months, our 3 properties had the highest guest satisfaction ratings in their category. We were consistently booked to capacity, with repeat customers and positive reviews that attracted new business faster than we could accommodate demand. I had proven to myself that my business instincts were sound, and my understanding of hospitality was deeper than ever. When Miguel decided to retire to spend time with his grandchildren, he made an offer that stunned me. "This business is yours now, Burton. You've earned it through dedication and hard work. I'm not selling it to you. I'm giving you my share because you've already paid for it with years of commitment." Using the foundation Miguel had provided, I launched Coastal Comfort, a chain of mid-range beachfront hotels that focused on authentic local experiences, rather than generic luxury amenities. My properties featured locally sourced food, partnerships with community businesses, and staff members who were genuine ambassadors for their regions. My first-hand knowledge of every hotel operation gave me advantages over competitors who had never worked a night shift or cleaned a bathroom. I understood that guest satisfaction started with employee satisfaction, that operational efficiency required attention to details most managers never noticed, and that authentic hospitality couldn't be faked or corporate mandated. The breakthrough came when I partnered with sustainable tourism investors who were looking for experienced operators to manage eco-friendly coastal retreats. My properties became destinations for conscious travelers who wanted luxury experiences that didn't compromise environmental values or local community integrity. Within 3 years, Coastal Comfort operated 12 properties across the Southeast, generating over $50 million in annual revenue. I had quietly become one of the most successful hospitality entrepreneurs in the region, while my family believed I was still a failure living in exile. But success felt hollow without justice. Every business milestone reminded me of the family who should have been celebrating with me. Every industry award I received felt incomplete because the people who had shaped my love for hospitality weren't there to witness my vindication. That's when Linda delivered the news that would complete my transformation from victim to victor. Seaside Haven Resort, the crown jewel my family had lost because of Jake's crimes, was being quietly offered for sale. The current owners had managed to drive the property into near bankruptcy through poor maintenance, terrible customer service, and financial mismanagement. The irony was perfect. The resort that my family had blamed me for losing was now available for purchase, and I had the resources to buy it. But more importantly, I learned that my family still held their annual reunion there every Memorial Day weekend, renting the same luxury suites they had once owned. Linda also delivered the shocking news about Dad's hidden trust fund. The documentation showed that Thomas had established a $2 million account for me years before our family crisis, long before he had any reason to doubt my character or loyalty. It was simply a father's gift to a son he was proud of, meant to help me establish my own legacy and hospitality. The trust fund documents included a letter that brought me to tears. Dad had written about his dreams for my future, his confidence in my business abilities, and his hope that the money would help me build something meaningful and lasting. He had never intended for the fund to be inheritance money. He had wanted me to use it while he was alive to see what I could accomplish. Mom had hidden this gift for over 2 years, unable to face the implications of Dad's faith in my innocence. The letter proved that Thomas had loved and trusted me even when evidence seemed to contradict that faith. Finding it now felt like receiving a final blessing from beyond the grave. I used Dad's trust fund, my business profits, and a loan secured by my properties to purchase Seaside Haven Resort through a shell company called Horizon Holdings. The legal structure ensured that my family would have no way of knowing I owned the property until I chose to reveal myself. Restoring Seaside Haven became my obsession. I spent 6 months personally overseeing every detail of the renovation, transforming the property back into the premier destination it had been during my childhood. I hired the best craftsmen to restore the original architectural details, upgraded all the technology systems, and created new amenities that would make it the most desirable resort on the coast. But my real focus was on timing. I knew my family's reunion was scheduled for Memorial Day weekend, exactly 8 months after I took ownership. I had 8 months to transform the property and prepare for the confrontation that would change everything. The renovated resort was spectacular. Original hardwood floors gleamed under restored crystal chandeliers. The oceanfront suites featured floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased breathtaking sunrise and sunset views. The dining room served locally sourced cuisine that earned recognition from regional food critics. Every room was booked solid for months in advance. As Memorial Day approached, I implemented the final phase of my plan. I deliberately blocked all availability for the reunion weekend and launched an aggressive marketing campaign that ensured complete occupancy. Every suite, every room, every space in the resort was reserved for paying customers who had no connection to the Walker family. When my family called to make their annual reservation, they were told that new ownership had no record of any special arrangements. Seaside Haven Resort was completely booked, with a waiting list that extended months into the future. Standing on the deck where I had played as a child, I watched the sunset paint the ocean the same golden color I remembered from family dinners, when life was simple and love was unconditional. Tomorrow, my family would arrive expecting their usual accommodations. Instead, they would discover that the son they had discarded as a failure had become successful enough to buy back everything they had lost. Justice was finally within reach, served with a side of irony that felt sweeter than any revenge I could have imagined. My revenge required precision timing that would maximize emotional impact while ensuring my family understood exactly what had happened and why. The annual Walker family reunion wasn't just a casual gathering. It was a sacred tradition that had continued for 15 years, even after they lost ownership of Seaside Haven. Every Memorial Day weekend, 3 generations of Walkers gathered in the same luxury suites to maintain the illusion of family unity. I studied their reservation patterns through the resort's historical records. They always booked the presidential suite for Mom and Dad, the ocean view suite for Jake and his wife Amanda, the garden suite for Sarah and Marcus, and connecting rooms for children and visiting relatives. The total cost exceeded $15,000 for the weekend, money the family could barely afford given their financial struggles. My strategy was ruthlessly calculated. I blocked every room they had ever reserved and launched a targeted marketing campaign designed to ensure complete occupancy. I partnered with luxury travel agencies, offered special packages to corporate retreat planners, and created exclusive weekend experiences that commanded premium rates. By February, every room was booked through September. But my real masterpiece was the guest list I assembled for Memorial Day weekend. Through my connections in sustainable tourism, I attracted environmental leaders, hospitality industry executives, and successful entrepreneurs who represented everything I had accomplished during my exile. These guests wouldn't just witness my family's confrontation, they would serve as proof of my professional success and industry respect. I also reached out to family members who had been sympathetic to me, but afraid to openly support me during the scandal. Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother, had always been skeptical of Jake's story. He was a retired accountant with a sharp eye for financial irregularities, and he had asked uncomfortable questions during family gatherings that others preferred to avoid. "Robert, this is Burton," I said when I called him in March. "I know we haven't spoken in years, but I have some information about our family situation that I think you should see." Uncle Robert agreed to meet me at a restaurant halfway between his home and mine. When I showed him portions of Linda's investigation, his face went pale with anger and recognition. "I knew something was wrong," he said, studying the bank records that documented Jake's embezzlement. "Your father asked me to look at some financial statements right before he died. The numbers didn't make sense, but then he had his heart attack before we could investigate further." Robert revealed that several family members had harbored private doubts about my guilt, but feared speaking up, because Mom had made it clear that questioning the official story meant choosing sides against family unity. The pressure to maintain appearances had silenced potential allies who might have helped me years earlier. My cousin Diana, Uncle Robert's daughter, had witnessed some of Jake's erratic behavior at family events. She remembered him making nervous phone calls during gatherings, disappearing for hours without explanation, and becoming agitated when anyone asked about his business trips. Diana had always wondered why someone who supposedly helped save the family business seemed so stressed and secretive. I began building a support network for the confrontation I had planned. Not to gang up on Jake and Mom, but to ensure that when the truth came out, there would be witnesses who could confirm my innocence and help the family process what they learned. I wanted healing, not just revenge. The most unexpected contact came from Emma. My ex-girlfriend called me in April, her voice shaky with emotion and guilt. "Burton, I need to tell you something that I should have told you years ago," she said. "Jake came to see me about 2 years after you left. He was drunk and crying, and he confessed everything. He told me he had gambling debts, and that he had stolen money to pay them. He begged me not to tell you because he said it would destroy what was left of your family." Emma had been carrying the weight of Jake's confession for 6 years, watching me suffer in exile while knowing I was innocent. She had wanted to contact me many times, but feared the consequences of revealing Jake's secret. Learning through mutual friends that I was doing well professionally had finally given her the courage to reach out. "I broke up with you because I thought you had betrayed your family," she said through tears. "But Jake was the one who betrayed everyone, including me by making me keep his secret. I'm so sorry, Burton. I should have been braver." Emma's testimony would be crucial during the confrontation because it proved Jake had been aware of his guilt and had actively worked to maintain the deception. Her confession also revealed that Jake had approached other people over the years, testing their loyalty and ensuring their silence about his crimes. As Memorial Day approached, I felt a mixture of anticipation and sadness. The little boy who had spent summers running along Seaside Haven's beaches had never imagined he would return as an adult, seeking justice against his own family. But the man who had survived 8 years of exile knew that some wounds could only heal after the infection was completely removed. I prepared for every possible scenario. If my family was willing to listen and acknowledge their mistakes, I was ready to offer forgiveness and rebuild our relationships. If they remained defensive and refused to accept responsibility, I was prepared to maintain my distance, while ensuring they could no longer harm me financially or emotionally. The resort was ready. Every room was occupied by successful professionals who represented my new life and achievements. The staff was trained to handle any situation with discretion and professionalism. The evidence was compiled and organized for maximum clarity and impact. On Thursday before Memorial Day weekend, I received the call I had been waiting for. Mom's voice was frustrated and confused as she demanded to speak with someone about their annual reservation. "This is Dorothy Walker, and we've been holding our family reunion at Seaside Haven for 15 years. There must be some mistake about our rooms being unavailable." I listened to her conversation with my front desk manager, who politely explained that new ownership had no record of any special arrangements and that the property was completely booked. Mom became increasingly agitated as she realized their sacred family tradition was in jeopardy. "Do you understand who we are?" she demanded. "The Walker family built the reputation this resort enjoys. We deserve accommodation." But Seaside Haven owed the Walker family nothing. Under my ownership, the resort's reputation was built on excellence, integrity, and authentic hospitality, values that had been absent from my family's treatment of their innocent son. Friday evening, I stood on the deck where I had watched so many family sunsets during happier times. Tomorrow, my family would arrive expecting their usual accommodations. Instead, they would discover that the son they had discarded as a failure had become successful enough to control their access to the very place where they had destroyed his life. The boy who had been exiled was gone. The man who remained was ready to reclaim everything that had been stolen from him, starting with the truth. Memorial Day weekend arrived with perfect weather and crystal-clear skies that seemed designed for drama. At 9:30 in the morning, I watched from my office window as the familiar convoy of Walker family vehicles pulled into Seaside Haven's parking area. Mom rode in the front seat of Jake's luxury sedan, while Sarah followed in her SUV with Tyler and the luggage that suggested they expected their usual 3-day stay. Their confusion was immediate and visible. The front desk area was bustling with successful business people, checking in for corporate retreats and luxury weekend getaways. My guests looked prosperous and confident, a stark contrast to my family's increasingly frustrated demeanor as they waited in line. I watched Mom approach the reception desk, her voice carrying the entitled tone I remembered from childhood when she expected immediate accommodation for any Walker family request. "I'm Dorothy Walker, and we need to speak with management about our family reunion reservation." Jessica, my front desk manager, was perfectly trained for this moment. She politely checked the computer system and explained that Seaside Haven Resort was completely booked for the weekend, with no record of any special arrangements for the Walker family. She offered to check nearby properties for availability, but the Memorial Day holiday had every decent hotel fully occupied. "There must be some mistake," Mom insisted, her voice rising with each word. "We've held our family reunion here for 15 years. Even after we sold the property, the previous owners honored our annual arrangement." Jake stepped forward, trying to project the authority he had wielded as the family's supposed financial savior. "Perhaps we could speak with the owner or general manager? I'm sure we can work something out." That's when I made my entrance. I walked through the lobby doors wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, projecting the confidence of a successful resort owner who belonged in this environment. The shock on their faces was immediate and profound. Mom actually stepped backward, grabbing Jake's arm for support as she processed what her eyes were seeing. Sarah's mouth fell open in disbelief. Tyler, now 12 years old, stared at me with curiosity, since he had no clear memory of his disappeared uncle. "Burton?" Mom whispered, her voice barely audible above the lobby's ambient noise. "What are you doing here?" I smiled calmly, enjoying the moment I had fantasized about for 8 years. "I own this resort, Mom. I bought it last year and spent 6 months restoring it to its former glory. As for your reservation concerns, I'm afraid we're completely booked for the weekend." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake's face had gone completely white, and I could see his hands trembling as the implications of my statement sank in. Sarah looked back and forth between me and our parents, trying to process how her exiled brother had become successful enough to own their former crown jewel property. "You own Seaside Haven?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with wonder and confusion. "But how is that possible? I thought you were." "You thought I was what, Sarah? A failure? A disappointment? Someone who destroyed his own family and deserved to be cast out forever?" My words were calm but pointed, each one carrying 8 years of accumulated pain. Mom found her voice, but it carried none of its usual authority. "We need to talk privately. This is family business." "No," I replied firmly. "This is my business now. You're guests here, just like everyone else. If you'd like to discuss accommodation options, we can do that in the lobby like any other customers." I gestured toward the seating area where other families were relaxing before check-in. The message was clear. They would receive no special treatment based on our shared history. They would be treated with professional courtesy, nothing more. Jake finally spoke, his voice cracking with nervous energy. "Burton, I think there are some misunderstandings we need to clear up. Maybe we could find a quiet place to discuss our family situation." "What misunderstandings would those be, Jake?" I asked, maintaining my professional demeanor while letting my words carry deeper meaning. "Are you confused about why I'm successful? Surprised that I survived 8 years of exile? Or maybe you're wondering how I could afford to purchase a $12 million resort?" Before Jake could respond, I signaled to Linda Chen, who had been waiting in the restaurant area. She approached our group carrying a leather folder that contained the evidence I had spent years accumulating. "I believe you know Linda," I said as my private investigator joined our conversation. "She's been very thorough in her research about our family's financial history. Would you like to see what she's discovered?" Jake's face lost what little color it had remaining. He recognized Linda from the casino surveillance photos, though he probably didn't know she had been documenting his activities for years. The folder in her hands represented his worst nightmare, proof of his crimes and systematic deception. "Perhaps we should find a private conference room," Mom suggested, finally recognizing that this conversation was heading somewhere she wasn't prepared for in such a public setting. I led them to the resort's business center, an elegant conference room overlooking the ocean where I had held legitimate business meetings for months. The irony wasn't lost on me, that this room had witnessed more honest communication in 1 year under my ownership than our family had managed in the past decade. Once we were seated around the mahogany conference table, I opened Linda's folder and began displaying evidence of Jake's crimes. Bank records showing systematic embezzlement. Casino surveillance photos documenting his gambling addiction. Testimony from gaming industry sources about his losses. Email evidence of his financial manipulation and Mom's complicity in covering up his crimes. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Each document told part of a story that painted Jake as a pathological gambler who had betrayed his family's trust while using me as a convenient scapegoat for his own financial crimes. Sarah stared at the documents in shock, her hands shaking as she realized the magnitude of what she was seeing. "Jake, is this real? Have you been gambling away our money this whole time?" Jake's composure finally cracked completely. 8 years of maintaining his deception while living with guilt had taken its toll, and being confronted with irrefutable proof of his crimes broke down his psychological defenses. "I never meant for it to get this bad," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "It started with just small amounts to cover a few poker losses. Then the debts got bigger, and I kept thinking I could win it back before anyone noticed." The confession poured out of him like water through a broken dam. The gambling addiction that had consumed his life for over a decade. The systematic theft from company accounts to pay ever-increasing casino debts. The manipulation of financial records to hide his crimes. The calculated decision to frame me for his own mistakes when the tech investment crash provided perfect cover. When Burton suggested diversifying our investments, I saw an opportunity. Jake admitted through sobs. I had already lost the renovation money at poker tables, but I could make it look like his investment decisions had failed instead of admitting what I had really done. Sarah's shock turned to horror as she realized her innocent brother had spent 8 years in exile, while their criminal brother lived as the family hero. "You let us believe Burton had betrayed us while you were the one stealing from us the whole time?" But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Mom's face had remained stone cold throughout Jake's confession, showing no surprise at his admissions. When Sarah turned to her for comfort and explanation, Mom's reaction revealed the depth of her complicity. "You knew," Sarah whispered, studying Mom's expression. "You knew Jake was lying, and you let Burton suffer anyway." Mom's silence confirmed what the evidence had already suggested. She had discovered Jake's embezzlement, chosen to cover it up, and maintained my exile rather than admit she had destroyed her relationship with her innocent son. Her pride had been more important than my pain, her image more valuable than my life. The family that had cast me out as a destroyer sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that they had protected their real destroyer while exiling their victim. 8 years of lies were unraveling in a single afternoon, and none of them could escape the weight of what they had done. Tyler spoke for the first time since entering the conference room, his young voice cutting through the adult drama with heartbreaking clarity. "Does this mean I really do have an uncle? And he's not a bad person?" Looking at my nephew, I realized that revenge felt hollow compared to the opportunity to build something positive from the wreckage of our family's betrayal. The choice I faced would determine not just my future, but the kind of man I wanted to be after 8 years of exile had taught me who I truly was. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 8. Justice and Redemption. Asterisk, asterisk. The silence in the conference room stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Jake's confession hung in the air like smoke, poisoning any illusion that our family crisis had been a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't about poor communication or unfortunate timing. It was about deliberate deception, systematic theft, and the conscious decision to destroy an innocent person rather than face uncomfortable truth. Sarah broke the silence first, her voice thick with emotion and disbelief. 8 years, Jake. Burton has been alone for 8 years because you were too cowardly to admit what you had done. Do you have any idea what you've stolen from us? Not just money, but time we can never get back. Jake remained slumped in his chair, no longer the confident older brother who had played family savior while secretly playing family destroyer. His gambling addiction and financial crimes would soon become legal matters, requiring criminal prosecution. But the emotional crimes he had committed against our family relationships were beyond any court's jurisdiction. "I'm calling the police," Sarah announced, reaching for her phone. "Jake needs to face criminal charges for what he's done." I placed my hand gently on her arm, stopping her from dialing. "Sarah, we'll deal with the legal issues appropriately, but right now, I need to hear from Mom." All eyes turned to Dorothy Walker, the family matriarch who had wielded ultimate authority over our exile and reconciliation decisions. She sat rigid in her chair, still refusing to acknowledge her own complicity in the injustice that had destroyed 8 years of my life. "Mom," I said quietly, "Linda's evidence shows that you knew about Jake's embezzlement over a year ago. You helped cover it up rather than admit you had wrongly accused me. I need to hear you acknowledge that." Mom's composure finally cracked, but instead of remorse, she displayed the defensive anger of someone who refused to accept responsibility for her choices. "I was trying to protect what was left of this family. If we had admitted we were wrong about you, it would have destroyed everything." Her words revealed the twisted logic that had guided her decisions. She believed that maintaining a lie was preferable to facing truth, if that truth challenged her authority or exposed her mistakes. She had chosen family image over family integrity, public perception over personal relationships. "You destroyed everything anyway," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the rage building inside me. "You destroyed your relationship with your youngest son, robbed Tyler of his uncle, and enabled Jake to continue stealing while everyone suffered financially. Your pride cost this family far more than any truth could have." Tyler, who had been listening to adult conversations he was too young to fully understand, asked the question that cut deepest. "Grandma, why didn't you want Uncle Burton to be part of our family? What did he do that was so bad you never wanted to see him again?" Mom couldn't answer because there was no answer. I had done nothing wrong except suggest legitimate business investments that Jake had used as cover for his own crimes. My exile had been based entirely on fabricated evidence and false accusations, maintained by people who preferred comfortable lies to difficult truths. Emma chose that moment to enter the conference room, having driven down from Charleston after I called her the previous evening. Her presence represented another piece of evidence that would complete the picture of Jake's deception. "Hello, Mrs. Walker," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years of guilt and regret. "I think it's time I told you what Jake confessed to me 6 years ago." Emma's testimony about Jake's drunken admission of guilt provided the final piece of evidence that proved his consciousness of wrongdoing. He hadn't just made mistakes or errors in judgment. He had deliberately framed his innocent brother while fully aware of his own guilt. The confrontation that followed was painful but necessary. Each family member had to face their role in maintaining the injustice that had defined our relationships for 8 years. Sarah acknowledged that she had been too afraid to question the family narrative, even when details didn't make sense. Uncle Robert admitted he had suspected problems, but lacked the courage to investigate further after Dad died. Mom's eventual breakdown was complete and devastating. Years of suppressed guilt about Dad's final doubts, fear of admitting her mistakes, and the stress of covering Jake's continued crimes had taken their toll. She collapsed into tears that seemed to contain 8 years of accumulated regret and self-recrimination. "I was so angry," she sobbed, "so hurt, that someone I loved and trusted could betray us. When Jake showed me the evidence, I believed it because I needed someone to blame for losing everything we had worked for. But after your father died, when I found signs that something else might be true, I was too proud and too scared to investigate." Her apology, when it finally came, was heartfelt, but insufficient to repair the damage that had been done. "I'm sorry, Burton. I'm sorry for not listening to you, for not investigating Jake's claims, for choosing to protect a lie rather than search for truth. I'm sorry for the years we've lost and the pain you've suffered because of my mistakes. But apologies couldn't restore 8 years of missed family gatherings, couldn't give me back the relationship with Tyler that should have been nurtured from birth, couldn't undo the professional damage that had forced me to rebuild my career from nothing. Some wounds heal with time and effort. Others leave permanent scars that change you forever." The question I faced was, what kind of man I wanted to be moving forward. I could choose permanent estrangement, maintaining my success while keeping my family at a distance as punishment for their betrayal. Or I could choose the harder path of rebuilding relationships based on new foundations of honesty and accountability. Tyler made the decision for me. My 12-year-old nephew, who had grown up believing his uncle was a villain, approached me with the innocence and hope that only children possess. "Uncle Burton," he said, his voice small but determined, "I don't understand everything that happened with money and businesses and stuff, but I understand that nobody listened to your side of the story, and that wasn't fair. Would you maybe want to teach me about hotels and business like Grandpa Thomas used to do with you?" In that moment, looking at my nephew who had been robbed of 8 years of uncle-nephew relationship through no fault of his own, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to build a better future despite the past. I established a college trust fund for Tyler that would ensure his education, regardless of his parents' financial situation. I offered Sarah a management position at one of my coastal comfort properties, giving her the opportunity to rebuild her career while proving her commitment to earning back my trust. Jake would face criminal charges for his embezzlement and fraud, but I also arranged for him to enter a gambling addiction treatment program as part of his plea agreement. Destroying him completely wouldn't repair the damage he had caused, but helping him address his underlying problems might prevent future victims. Mom presented the greatest challenge. Her complicity in maintaining my exile, even after discovering Jake's guilt, represented a betrayal that went beyond simple mistakes. I told her that our relationship would be rebuilt slowly, based on her actions rather than her words, and only if she proved through consistent behavior that she had learned from her mistakes. The family business assets were restructured with proper oversight and accountability measures. I purchased the remaining Walker Hospitality Group properties to prevent complete bankruptcy, but the new organization operated under professional management with strict financial controls. Seaside Haven Resort became the venue for a very different kind of family reunion. Instead of the entitled gathering of people who had cast out their innocent member, it hosted a careful reconstruction of relationships based on truth, accountability, and genuine remorse. Emma and I began rebuilding our relationship slowly, starting with friendship and honest communication about the years we had lost to deception and fear. The 8 years of separation had changed us both, but the foundation of respect and affection that had originally brought us together remained strong enough to build upon. 6 months after the confrontation, I stood on the same deck where I had made my revelation phone call to Mom. But this time, Tyler stood beside me, asking questions about hotel operations and business strategy, while the sunset painted the ocean in shades of gold and possibility. "Uncle Burton," he asked, "are you glad you bought back Seaside Haven?" I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 8 years of exile that taught me the difference between success and revenge, between justice and healing, between being right and being wise. "I'm glad I learned that family isn't just about blood relationships," I told him. "It's about people who stand by you during your worst moments, who believe in you when others don't, and who help you become the person you're meant to be. Miguel, Linda, Emma, and now you are my real family. The others will have to earn their way back." Tyler nodded solemnly, understanding more than his 12 years should have required. "So sometimes being excluded from the wrong family helps you find the right one?" Out of the mouths of babes. Exactly right, Tyler. Sometimes being excluded from the wrong table helps you realize you deserve to build your own. The lesson I learned through 8 years of exile and ultimate triumph wasn't about business success or financial revenge. It was about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who value truth over comfort, integrity over image, and authentic relationships over convenient deceptions. Real success isn't measured by the size of your bank account or the properties you own. It's measured by your ability to rise above those who try to diminish you, to build something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal, and to choose healing over hatred when given the opportunity for either. Standing on that deck, watching my nephew discover his own dreams while the sun set on a day of honest family communication, I realized that the boy who had been exiled was truly gone. The man who remained had learned that the greatest revenge against those who doubt you isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so successful and so content with your choices that their opinions become irrelevant to your happiness. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to people who excluded you isn't an angry accusation or a bitter complaint. Sometimes it's simply, "Just like your house, mine's completely booked. No room available." And then you hang up and focus on building the life you actually deserve. Have you ever been wrongly blamed for something that changed your whole life? How did you handle the injustice? And what lessons did you learn about family, forgiveness, and building your own success despite setbacks? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's facing their own difficult family situation. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to let me know. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and building resilience in the face of unfair treatment. And share this story with someone who might need to hear that their current struggles don't define their future possibilities. Thank you for listening to my journey from exile to triumph. Remember that every ending is also a beginning, and sometimes the family that excludes you just makes room for the family that truly deserves you. Until next time, keep building the life you actually want, rather than fighting for acceptance from people who don't value what you bring to the table.